record. Yesterday, we learned about finding the vertex. Today, we are taking this all the way. So just as a reminder, you find your x coordinate, your h value at the opposite of b over 2a. Then to find your k value or your y value for the vertex, you plug it back in. Now, yesterday we talked about axis of symmetry. I know we did this, but let's do this again very quickly. So opposite of b over 2a. What is the opposite of b in number 2?
-8.
Over, and 2 times a, my a value is -2. So what is 2 times -2?
-4.
So my vertex is going to be at 2 something, and that's the h value. How do you find your k value? All you have to do is plug it back in everywhere you see an x. So remember, exponent first, so 2 squared is 4 times -2 is -8, plus 8 times 2 is 16, plus 5, and I get 13. Now that's what we did yesterday. Any questions? So I need you guys to know that really well going into this, because everything we do plays off of the vertex. So if you can't find the vertex, you're going to be in some trouble. You're going to be falling behind. So let's go on and look at this. Here's the next part. Again, maybe you want to take a picture. Maybe you want to write this down. Maybe you just want to follow. It doesn't really matter to me. But we've got a couple things that we have to add on to this. If the parabola opens up, and we talked about it yesterday, if the parabola opens up, which we know it's how it's going to open by your a value. So if the graph opens up, your vertex is going to be the highest or lowest point, but if it opens up, it has to be the lowest point. So that's why it creates a minimum value. If the parabola opens down, if a is negative, and again, we discussed this yesterday, if your a value is negative, then that means it opens down, and then your vertex will be the highest value or the maximum value. Now, hopefully that makes sense. A lot of people mix that up. Now, axis of symmetry, we've been talking about for really about 4 days now, but your axis of symmetry is just the line, the equation, x equals whatever the h value is. Pretty simple. So the axis of symmetry is that dotted line that goes straight down through the vertex. Any questions at all so far? Then let's go ahead and piece this together. Yesterday, this is where we ended, and we ended by finding the vertex on both. So once you find the vertex, I want you to tell whether the parabola opens up or down, whether it has a maximum and what that maximum is, and the axis of symmetry. So again, I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes here on number 1 to answer those questions. So I want to know the vertex. I want to know how it opens. I want to know the max or min. And I want to know axis of symmetry. All right, 2 minutes, go. About 30 more seconds. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. To find the vertex, I need to know the opposite of B over 2A. Now, what is my value for A, B, and C? A is what?
2.
B is?
-4.
And C is?
-1.
Perfect, thank you. So the opposite of B, if it's -4, the opposite is +4 over 2 times A. 2 times 2 is 4. So my vertex is 1 something, and that's the H value. How do you find K? Plug it back in anywhere you see an X. So I have 2 times 1 squared minus 4 times 1 minus 1. Remember, exponent first. 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. Minus 4 minus 1, which is -2, -3. Now, we've just found the vertex, and now we can answer all the questions, all of our questions. This is pretty simple, and I need you guys to really pay attention here. If we were in class, I would be walking around making sure that everybody got this stuff. This is really important for everything we're doing for the next week and a half. So how does this open? First of all, was A positive or negative?
Positive.
It's positive, which means it has to open up. Because A is positive, I know it has to open up. So now, does this create a maximum value or a minimum value?
Minimum.
Perfect. Because it opens up, your vertex is the lowest point on the graph. Again, we're going to keep talking about the same concept, so I really hope it's not just the same 2 or 3 people working and answering the questions every time. It is a minimum value. What is your minimum value? It's
1.
always
-1.
That's always your K value, always. So remember, minimum or maximum, it's always going to be your Y value. So it's talking about how high or how low it goes. So your minimum is -3. It's always your K value. And your axis of symmetry is always the line X equals whatever X equals in your vertex, which is +1. That's it. Now, just for good measure, I asked you guys at the very beginning to describe the transformation, but I think that that's easiest to do at the end. Now that we kind of know what it looks like, now we can describe this. So I would say, wait, my A value is 2. So if my A value is 2, what does that 2 do to my graph? Anyone? It's bigger than 1, so what does that do?
Stretches it.
Perfect. Thank you, Jalen. It stretches. So it's been stretched. And if my vertex is 1, -3, how did the vertex move it? So those are really the only things you have to account for. 1, is that going to be up, down, left, or right 1?
Down.
Right. It's the H value or with the X, and the X always moves it left and right. So if it's positive, you think it would move it.
Right.
There you go. So right 1, and that's your K value or your Y value, which moves it
Down.
down 3. So again, today we're just making sense of everything that we've already done. We're cleaning some of this up. So again, I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes to answer all of those questions for number 2, and then we've got to move on. All right, I don't want to wait too much longer here. No, that was only about 1.5 minutes. But how do I find my vertex? My vertex is opposite of b over 2a, which gives me what over what?
6 over 2 times -1.
Exactly. So my x coordinate or my h value is -3. So right away, because that's -3, I could go ahead and describe it. Now let's wait for the end for that. Because my h value is -3, let's plug it back in. Here's where we get in trouble. Make sure that you use parentheses. Again, you guys all have graphing calculators, so you could just plug this back in, plugging in -3 for x. So that's the opposite of -3 squared. -3 squared is 9, so the opposite is -9. -6 times -3 is positive 18, plus 2 makes it 11. People tend to make mistakes there if you have the opposite of x squared or a negative sign in front of the x squared. Now, real quick, let's go ahead and describe it. My a is negative. How does it open?
Down.
Down. So it opens down. There's my vertex. And it opens down. Now, how would I describe the transformation? If it opens down, I would say it is reflected over the x, and then it's moved how?
To the left
Left 3, good. And
down 11.
then, oh, it's positive.
I mean up 11. I'm sorry.
Up 11, you're good. I just want to make sure that you guys are getting all that, and then up 11. All right, so there's all of that. Max or min value, you already told me it opens down. So is that the highest point on this graph or the lowest?
Maximum.
It's a maximum. What is your maximum value?
11.
Exactly, and your axis of symmetry is the line. Do not forget the equation. X equals what?
-3.
Perfect, Jalen. That's it. So now you guys know almost everything there is to know about this stuff. We've got one more day on this tomorrow, but we still have another thing to learn here. Where we have to talk about the domain and the range. Now, some people make this out to be harder than it is. Some people get this right away, and this is one of the easier things we do. I understand it both ways. If you struggle with this, I get it. Now, I remember 20 some years ago being in your shoes, being a sophomore in Algebra 2, and then my teacher just jumping right into domain and range and never really explained it, and I just didn't get it. But as soon as somebody just put it in plain English, I thought, oh, well, that's easy. That makes sense. Your domain is just your list of x's. That's all your domain is. And I know we've kind of talked about this before. List of x's or what x can be. Remember, your x's go left and right. So on all of these parabolas, your domain is going to be all real numbers because arrow to the left, follow it along, arrow to the right, there's no break in this graph. And that's what that means. All of these x values are accounted for. It is all real numbers. Now, I want you guys to really think about this because this should make sense. If my graph opens up, does my vertex create a maximum value or a minimum value if it opens up?
Minimum.
It makes a minimum value. So let's go back to that last problem or one of those problems. Let's just say I've got the 0.25, right? This is my vertex, my H and my K. If this is the minimum value, my minimum is 5, my range is always from low to high. It's what can your y's be? So I don't care about left to right anymore. I would literally put my pencil on the lowest spot, and does it go up or down? Well, if this is the lowest spot, the minimum, then everything else is higher than that or bigger than that, right? So my range is just going to be y is greater than or equal to whatever that minimum value is. Once you understand it, and it might not be now, but once you understand this, it really makes sense and it's a pretty easy concept. If it's a minimum value, if that's the lowest it gets, then all of your other values have to be bigger than that. If it opens down, let's call this, I don't know, how about -3.7? Doesn't really matter. If it opens down, is that a maximum value or minimum value?
Maximum.
It's a maximum. And what is your maximum value?
-3.
Always y, always the y. It's just 7. Okay, so it's always your y value. So again, we're talking about the height of it. The range always goes up and down. So it's always got to be your y value here, this k value. So if that's your maximum value, everything else has to be less than that, right? So your range would be all y's less than or equal to the maximum. Again, it takes a little practice, but once you see it, it does make sense. So that's why we started with the maximum or minimum first. If that's the highest point, then every other point has to be less than that. If it's the lowest point, every other point has to be greater than that or higher than that. Any questions? And your domain is always, always, always all real numbers, which if I have not told you or if you have not been told, we don't have to write all real numbers. You can, but you don't have to. Instead, the symbol is an R with 2 legs. That's the symbol for all real numbers. Any questions? No? All right, so let's kind of put this all together. That's increasing, decreasing intervals. Oh, shoot. All right, so here's the first thing. Let's pick number one first. So that's just tying back. We've got a test next Friday in here. This is tying back stuff we did earlier in the week. So number one, I want you to do this. Find the vertex. So find vertex, how it opens, up or down, axis of symmetry, max min, domain and range. Oh man, that seems like a lot of stuff, but you can do this. And we've got about 20 minutes left. We still have one more thing to talk about, increasing or decreasing intervals. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. If this is in vertex form, what's my vertex here?
3, 1.
Perfect. And what's my A value? What's this value that's right here?
1.
So it's got to be positive 1, so it can't be 0. The whole thing would be 0. So my A value is 1, which means, does this open up or down?
Opens up.
Opens up. So if it opens up, all right, and I always like to draw this in just to make sense of it. If it opens up, does that create a maximum or minimum value?
Minimum. Maximum.
That's a minimum because that's the lowest it's going to be. And sorry, if we had more time to play with, we'd really have a conversation about this and have you guys explain this. It's a minimum value because it opens up. That's the lowest value this goes. So it's a minimum. And what is my minimum? Is it 3 or 1?
1.
There's 1. It's always, always, always that Y value. Now let's go ahead to domain and range. I know we forgot axis of symmetry, but my domain is always, always, always all real numbers. Domain is your list of X's left to right, arrow, arrow. But my range, if this is the minimum value, are all of my Y's going to be greater than or equal to 1 or less than or equal to 1?
Greater than?
That's exactly right. So once you know what the minimum is, that's the minimum. And again, think about those words, the minimum. If you do the minimum, you're doing the least amount of work. If the minimum amount of money, you're getting paid the bottom. So if it's the minimum, there's only one way to go, and that's up. So that's why it would be greater than or equal to. Okay? And the last one, your axis of symmetry, is the line x equals what? It's just 3. All right. So that's the first one. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So let's just do number like 2 and 3 real quick. And then we've really talked about a lot of stuff today. So take about, not too much time, take about a minute, and I want you to find a vertex on 2 and 3. So find the vertex for 2 and 3 real quick. 1 minute, go. All right. Opposite of B over 2A. The opposite of -6 is +6 over 2A gives me 3. Plug it back in. I get 9 minus 18 plus 1, which is -8. Opposite of B is 8 over -4. Plug it back in. -8 plus 16 minus 5. There you go. Any questions about that? Do not leave here today, and I mean that. Do not log off this call without being able to get the vertex. Because everything we do in here plays off of the vertex. Any questions? All right. So number 1, we found the vertex. There's number 2, how does it open? Opens how?
Up,
How do you know it opens up?
because it's the A is positive.
Exactly, because your A is positive. So number 3 opens how?
Down,
Down.
Because A is
negative.
perfect. So again, I'm doing these two together so that you can compare. So I'll change to green. So if it opens up, is this a maximum or minimum value? Is this the lowest or highest point on this graph?
Minimum.
It's the lowest, so it's a minimum. What is the minimum?
-8.
Perfect. And over here, if it opens down, is that a maximum or minimum?
Maximum.
And the maximum is
3.
perfect. All right. So we got the vertex opens up or down, max or min. Let's go ahead and put the axis of symmetry up here. We don't want to forget that. It's really simple. So your axis of symmetry, your AOS, is the line. Ooh, what is it for number 2? It's a vertical line through the x value. So x equals what?
3.
And then number 3, your axis of symmetry is what?
-2.
Perfect. Again, I think after tomorrow, this should all make perfect sense. I still understand where there's questions and confusion, and this is a lot, but you're gonna have to think through it. So we got all of these down. Now we need the domain and range. Let me go ahead and get this gone so we've got a little more room. Your domain and range. On number 2, your domain is always what? What is your domain always? No matter what it is?
All real numbers.
Which means this can keep going forever left to right, always. But your range can't. So again, on number 2, if your minimum value is -8, your minimum is -8, that means your range is going to be what? If this is the small, what'd you say?
Greater than or equal to -8.
That's exactly right. So your range down here, this is a maximum value. Your range is what?
Less than or equal to 3.
Perfect. Any questions? All right. The last thing we're gonna have to do today is this. Now, this is just one more look at this. We'll practice this even more tomorrow. But we're going to talk about the intervals and what this means. The reason we're putting all of this stuff together is really because it all ties into each other. I keep asking the same type of questions in different ways, or the same question in different ways. So increasing or decreasing intervals. Everybody already told me that this one opens up because A is 1. So I know it's going to look like this. And this is your vertex, right? So I had this vertex right here. And I'm going to stop sharing here for 1 second. We've got 10 minutes left. I kind of want to look and see who's paying attention here. So I've got a lot of people with their cameras off, which is fine. I've got, only got a couple people with their cameras on. All right, I see Kat, Caden, Landon, Allison, Ian, Gustavo, Anna. I see your faces. Jasmine, I see you. Everybody else, I'm just kind of wanting to check in. I really hope you're paying attention. I don't know if I can say this enough or stress this enough. This is one of the most confusing things. It doesn't have to be that bad. Oh, where did it go? It does not have to be that bad. Before I do this graph, get back to it. If this is where I start, and I've got something right here, and it's going like this, do you think that's a good sign? If that my stocks do that, is that good or is it bad? It's bad. It's decreasing. What this means is it's always from left to right. This is where I start, and it's going in this direction. So from left to right, what's happening to my Y values? So when it's talking about increasing or decreasing intervals, I'm going to put this in plain English. From left to right, are my Y's going up or down? All right. So from left to right, so right here, from left to right, are my Y values going up or down? Until I get right here. What's happening, and don't pay any attention to this arrow, means nothing. From here to here, my Y values going up or are they going down?
They're going down.
They're going down. So from the left side, my Y values are decreasing. So left side of H, which in this case is 3, Y's are decreasing. And then once it hits its lowest value, once it hits this, well, then it's going back up. My Y values are increasing. So from this point over, all of my Y values are now going up once it hits its minimum value. Again, that starts to make sense. All of this together takes practice. So from 3, so from the right side of 3, my Y's increase. So in general, if the graph opens up, it's decreasing on the left side of H. It's increasing on the right side of H. Remember, this is your H, that's your K. This is nothing more than a lot of stuff to remember, but if you just stop and think about it, It does make sense. So the Y values are ones that increase and decrease and hit the maximum and minimum value. Your X values just tell you where it's hitting that value. So last thing, and then we're done. And now you also have enough to not finish your homework, but to start your homework. If it's decreasing, let's look at this again. If it's decreasing, and this is my point, -2, 3. 3 is my maximum value, right? So my maximum value is 3. And that happens at -2. Well, again, from left to right, what's happening to my Y values? Are they getting bigger or are they getting smaller?
Bigger.
They're getting bigger. So if my graph opens down, it increases on the left side of H. And then once it hits the maximum value, then they start to decrease again. So then they decrease on the right side of -2. So in general, if the graph opens up, it goes from decreasing to minimum to increasing. If it opens down, it goes from increasing to the max to decreasing. That's really all you have to know. So really the max, min, and range and decreasing, it's all the same thing. And we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I know that we just talked about a lot. So does anybody have any questions? All right. What I would do if I were you is I would start your homework this weekend so you can bring specific questions either to class or you can stay after for office hours on Monday. We have a test next Friday, and really Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have to learn one more thing. All right? No questions. Have a wonderful day.